Welcome to Beautifully Consumed. I'm Chelsea Leigh, owner of CHELSEA Leigh Jewelry and your host. I'm just a girl that decided to go for it, and now I'm a successful business owner. But there's more to life than business, and that's why I found myself on a mission to love and become my most true self. I'm so excited to have this podcast as a space where we can do that together. You're in the right place if you're ready to be wildly dedicated to finding your purpose, becoming your most true self, and learning what it means to be beautifully consumed by living a life that is undeniably yours. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Beautifully Consumed. I'm your host, Chelsea Leigh, or you can call me Chelsea, whatever you prefer. I am just so happy to have you here. A quick note before we get started, all of my podcasts will be posted in video format on my YouTube channel. If you'd prefer to watch on YouTube, I will leave the link to that in the show notes below. Okay, so in the first episode, I gave you a very quick introduction to me, but I kind of glazed over that because I wanted to save a more formal introduction for its own episode. And I want to tell you just everything about me, tell you about who I am as a person, tell you about my journey as an entrepreneur, and kind of just how I've gotten to the point where I am today. I try to share bits and pieces of my personal life on my communities that I've built through my jewelry business. And I always enjoy that so much, but there's only so much that I can share about myself and connect with people on platforms like Instagram. Like there's only so much you can learn from an Instagram caption or a 30 to 60 second reel. And I really do enjoy connecting with the community that I've built over the past 5 years. And I'm so excited to have this podcast as a place where I can continue to build and grow those relationships even further and deeper and build new relationships. You'll notice I refer to myself as Chelsea Leigh, but in reality, most of my friends and family just call me Chelsea. That's how I introduce myself in real life. But I've sort of developed this online persona as Chelsea Leigh. I started my own business about 5 years ago now, and I could not decide what to name it. So I decided to name it after myself and name it CHELSEA Leigh Jewelry. Chelsea is my first name. Leigh is my middle name. So it is my real name. But I just think it's funny that over the years, people have started to recognize me and call me Chelsea Leigh instead of just Chelsea, which I'm not offended by at all. Like I answer to both. I just think it's cool that I've developed like this recognition or this persona as Chelsea Leigh. So that is why you hear me reference myself as Chelsea Leigh or Chelsea, whatever you want to call me. I'm totally happy with either. All right. So in this episode, I'm going to break this up into 2 segments. First, I want to tell you about me and who I am personally. And then I'll tell you about me and who I am as Chelsea Leigh, the business owner and entrepreneur. And this is something that I struggle with because as a business owner and entrepreneur, I have poured every ounce of my being into my business. Like literally my business is my baby. So it's hard to separate me from my business. And it's so easy for me to wrap up my identity in my business or being a business owner or making jewelry. It's such a huge part of my life, but I do have to realize at the end of the day, it is my job and that doesn't necessarily make me who I am at my core, which is an interesting thought and something that's challenging to think about. If you're also an entrepreneur or business owner, I'm sure you can relate to this on some level. So I challenge you, just as I challenged myself, to try to think about who you are outside of what you do and what your roles are and what your titles are, whether you own a business or not. Oftentimes when we meet new people or we're having small talk, just kind of getting to know people, we often ask others or get asked, tell me about yourself. We often just default to what we do for a living, which is great. And that's a big part of our identity. But I challenge you to think about, how can you answer that question without telling somebody what your hobbies are or what your job is? Like, who are you deep down at your core? What makes you you? And I think that this could be an interesting question to ask any guests that I have on the podcast. Like, tell me who you are, and then you can tell me what you do, but you've got to separate the two. So, anyway, I wrote some stuff down, and this was kind of my first time actually physically writing any of this down and going through this exercise on my own. So, bear with me here. I might stumble through this a little bit, but let's start out by telling you who I am as Chelsea. I am in my early 30s. I am a summer girl at heart and a Cancer. Got a summer birthday, and I love the beach. All three of those things go beautifully hand in hand. I feel like what that says about me is I love warmth and positivity and hope and just the new beginnings and the freshness and the aliveness that the feeling of summer brings. That is me to my core. I am very stubborn. Ever since I was little, my parents said some of the first words out of my mouth were, "I do it." And that is still very true to this day. I am an all or nothing type of person, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you want to look at it. But I've chosen to take that and use that as my greatest strength. And when I put my mind to something, if I want to do something, I do it. I am a creative person, and I love expressing my emotions and feelings and capturing those things through art. I am beautiful inside and out, and that's something I've had to work on. But now that I'm in my early 30s, I feel very confident saying that out loud. I am beautiful. I am empathetic, and I'm an Enneagram 9. I have a very easy time putting myself in other people's shoes and trying to relate with other people and just having compassion and understanding for what others are going through. And a funny side note on the Enneagram test, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like a personality test. And the first time I heard about this, I started taking the test to try to see what my results were. And every time I took the test, I would get a different result, which confused me. And I ended up talking with someone I know who specializes in the Enneagram. I told her, "Hey, I keep taking the test, but getting a different result every time." And she said to me, "Oh, you're an Enneagram 9." And I said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "Enneagram 9s have an easier time relating to other people than they do themselves. So when you're taking this test, you're kind of putting yourself in other people's shoes and answering as if you were these other personality types." And that just blew my whole mind, because I feel like that so perfectly describes me as a person and as someone who is very empathetic. So that's just a funny story about the Enneagram. I am a country girl and a city girl all in one. I grew up in the country, and I absolutely love the peace and the quiet, being out in nature, hearing the wind blow through the trees. I absolutely love the sounds of birds chirping. There's just so much peace being in the country. But I currently live in the city. I've lived in the city for quite a few years now. And I also love the hustle and bustle culture, all the things to do. I feel like that really aligns with me running my business and all of the ambition that I have. So I can't decide. I think if I had to pick one, I would say I do prefer the country over the city. I love having deep conversations. I am not a huge fan of small talk. Of course, I will have small talk, and I'm happy to do it to get to know people, but I would much rather prefer to get down to the real, raw, deep stuff. probably quicker than most people would. I am the kind of friend that can pick up with you right where we left off, no matter when the last time we saw each other was. Okay, I think that's a pretty good overview of who I am as a person. Hopefully, you kind of got to know me a little bit better. Now, I will transition into the next part of this episode where I'm just going to tell you the story about me, kind of how I grew up and went through my career choices, started my business, and ultimately got to this point where I'm sitting here talking to you through your earbuds listening. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in the country. I grew up in a very small town in Maryland. I absolutely loved growing up there. I grew up with two parents and a younger brother. I met my two very best friends. They're still my best friends to this day. I met them when I was super little. I think it's so cool and special to have lifelong friends like that. And I went to a relatively small high school. Everybody knew everyone. But even so, with being in a smaller environment, there still was the groups. You know, you had the popular kids and you had the athletes and the band kids and the theater kids and the art kids. And I feel like everyone has the same high school experience, no matter how big or small of a school you went, no matter where you went. That definitely was the case at my high school. But for whatever reason, I don't feel like I was categorized in a specific group. I kind of had friends in all those different groups. And that goes back to the results I got from the Enneagram test and being an empath and just being able to relate and connect with all these different types of people. I also was involved in all sorts of things in high school. I took art classes, I played sports, I worked a part-time job, I went to parties. Like I did a little bit of everything. So I had friends in all of these different groups. However, I was extremely shy, probably one of the most shy people you have ever met. And I know you're not going to believe me because I'm sitting here hosting my own podcast. Most people that know me now, they do not believe how shy I was when I was younger. Even my mom tells me how weird it is that I put myself out here and am so comfortable being in the public eye or public speaking because of how shy I was when I was younger. And not weird in like a bad way. She just is like, you've changed so much. It's kind of crazy. My face would turn red if I had to talk to anybody. And if you put me in front of the class to present, forget it. Like that was so daunting to me. So anyway, after high school, I desperately wanted a change of scenery. I applied to colleges all over the country with the hopes of going somewhere far away from home just for a change. And I ended up going to school in South Carolina. I went to Clemson University. Go Tigers, if anybody's listening from Clemson. I had no idea what I wanted to study. So I wanted to go to a big school where I had lots of options and room to explore. Ultimately, I ended up joining the business program and got my undergraduate degree in marketing and sales. During my time at Clemson, that was some of the best 4 years of my life. In fact, while I was there, I was convinced that was my peak and that those 4 years would be the best 4 years of my life. Obviously, I was wrong and life does get better after college, but I think that's a really good testament of how much I enjoyed my time there. And it's a really special place to me. It's where I met some of my very best friends. It's where I came out of my shell and learned so much about myself. It's where I met my boyfriend, Brad, which I'm so thankful for, and just have so many excellent and amazing memories. And it's also where I ended up getting my first full-time job after graduating from college. While I was in college, I actually was on track to graduate a semester early. And as I mentioned, I loved being there so much that I did not want to graduate early and leave and go work. Why would I want to do that? So I started applying for internships and ended up getting an internship with Clemson at the admissions office. So I worked for them for 2 semesters full time, wasn't taking any classes. I was a full time employee with the Clemson admissions office. And ultimately, after I graduated from Clemson and finished up my marketing and sales degree, they offered me a full time job. And again, why would I want to leave Clemson? That sounded like a great opportunity. And I really enjoyed my internship. So I ended up taking that as my full time job with kind of the expectation that would be a really great starter job and would help me kind of build up my resume to ultimately then apply for other jobs in marketing or sales business realm. While I was working there full time in the admissions office, I also decided to go ahead and get my MBA. So I would work full time during the day and go to MBA classes at night. And that took me 2 full years to complete my MBA working on that at night, which was a very challenging time, but I'm so grateful that I pushed through that and got that done. I finished my MBA and started applying for all sorts of business jobs, thinking, okay, I have my undergrad degree in marketing and sales. I've got a couple of years of work experience under my belt, and I have an MBA. So surely I should be a great candidate for any job I apply to. No, I was very wrong about that. I had a hard time even getting interviews anywhere, let alone any job offers. I don't know if it was me, my experience, or just the time and what was going on in the economy, but it was a very hard time for me to get another job. So I took a step back from that because it was very draining to me to submit all these applications and go to interviews for it to not go anywhere. It was kind of a hit on my self-esteem a little bit. I decided to take a break from applying and really just dove into my responsibilities at the admissions office. And I ended up really enjoying it. Like I said, I kind of took the job at first thinking it would be just a great stepping stone. But then my mindset started to shift and I started thinking, wow, I think I would really love to do this as a career. And I think I would be really good at this. So I started kind of envisioning myself ultimately being a director of admissions one day at a big school. Well, a promotion opened up for application at Clemson, and I decided to apply for it because that would be the great next step for me if I wanted to continue my career in college admissions. Well, I applied for the promotion, and my boss at the time was in charge of making the decisions for that job. And I made it to the final round of interviews, and he sat me down and he just told me flat out, I don't see this for you. And I was kind of taken aback because I seemed like the perfect candidate for this job. I had all of this experience already in the office. I was already doing some of the roles and requirements that this promotion would offer. And this was something that I had set my mind on doing. He just so matter-of-factly told me, I do not see you working in college admissions. I see you being so successful in the business world. And to me at the time, I was so offended by that because he is a director of admissions and he was telling me that he doesn't see me fit for his job one day. And that is kind of a big blow. And it's actually funny because I have seen him and talked to him since, and we've talked about that conversation. And obviously now I run my own business. I don't work in education anymore. And he was so right. And I told him that and we kind of laughed about it. But at the time, I was just so taken aback by it and quite frankly, offended and a little pissed off about it. But that's okay. Everything happens for a reason. So he ultimately did not choose me as the candidate for that job. Someone else got the job. But luckily, I was in the interview process for another job at a different school, and they did end up offering me a position. So I went ahead and took that. And it definitely made me sad to leave Clemson because I had dedicated so much of my time there. It's my alma mater. I love it so much. But I decided, okay, it's time for something new. I can get some new experience at a different school, and that'll help make my resume look better when ultimately I'm applying for assistant director positions in the future. So that's when I started working for the University of Alabama. And within my first couple of months working for Alabama, I just knew this isn't it. I'm not loving this. Maybe I should start thinking about business again because I just was not enjoying what I was doing. And I think maybe looking back, I really enjoyed what I was doing at Clemson because I was doing it for Clemson because I loved Clemson so much. But doing that same thing for a school that I didn't attend, I didn't have that same passion, which told me I'm not cut out for doing this as a career. So one day I just sort of had this light bulb moment and decided that I wanted to start my own business. I had no idea what I would be doing. I didn't have like a business plan or anything. I just knew I want to work for myself and start my own business. Kind of sounds like how I started this podcast if you go back and listen to episode 1. And it's interesting because now that I run my own business, so many people tell me, oh, well, that makes sense because you have your MBA. But all of my MBA classes were focused on the corporate world. None of them were focused on entrepreneurship. So while, yes, I did gain some valuable experience by getting these business degrees, they really did not prepare me in the way that I needed to be prepared in order to become an entrepreneur. So yeah, I have those under my belt, but starting a business to me was it was a new concept and something that I wasn't taught how to do in school. So it took me a whole year of kind of trying to play around with different ideas and figure out what I wanted to do. And I'm a creative person, and I always thought, oh, it would be very cool to be able to make money off of doing something creative. So I dabbled in painting and calligraphy and all these different things. And ultimately, one day I landed on making a pair of earrings. And there's another story that goes into this. I had never had my ears pierced. I wasn't afraid to do it or anything like that. I just never had gotten my ears pierced. And I got to a point where I was so old that I was like, what's the point of getting them pierced now? But my boyfriend always was like, why don't you have your ears pierced? You're the only girl I know that doesn't have your ears pierced. And I would always joke with him and say, well, when you buy me a pair of diamond earrings, I will go get my ears pierced. One Christmas, I open up my present from him. It's a pair of diamond earrings and a gift card to Claire's to get my ears pierced. So yes, as a 26-year-old, I went to Claire's for the very first time to get my ears pierced. That is just the most laughable story ever. I'll have to tell y'all more about that one day. So anyway, I had just gotten my ears pierced and I was obsessed with earrings now that I have holes in my ears that I can swap out accessories in. So I started spending a lot of money going to Target or little boutiques and just buying cheap, inexpensive, but very cute earrings. But I have really sensitive skin and they were just bothering my ears so much, like making them so hot and red and itchy to the point where I could not wear these cheap earrings I was buying. And that is sort of what led me to thinking, oh, well, maybe I could make my own pair of earrings with some better quality materials so that they wouldn't bother my ears. I went to Michael's, the craft store, bought some beads and some wire, made a couple pairs of earrings on the floor in my living room apartment. And instantly I just knew this is it. This is how I'm going to become a successful business owner. This is how I'm going to leave my full-time job. And this is what I'm meant to do. It was the weirdest feeling, but it just was a feeling of knowing. And I don't know how to describe it any other way than that. The earrings I was making at that time were not up to the standard or quality of earrings that would allow me to make enough money to leave my full-time job. And I knew that, but I also knew that I would gain knowledge and experience and get better over time. And I did not have any formal jewelry making training. I still to this day have not. I've taught myself everything I know about making jewelry. So I just knew I would teach myself over time. That was in probably like May or June of 2019. And over the course of the summer, I did all of the paperwork I needed to establish a business. I built a website. I started social media. And I started building a collection to launch. And in September of 2019, I officially launched my first collection, launched my business, and the rest is history. So I continued to grow my business. It was very rapid growth, and it was just really cool and motivating to see. I was still working full time for Alabama, and I would just work on the nights and weekends on jewelry. And I was working all the time, but at the time I was so motivated and just loving what I was doing that it was easy for me to do that because I had this end goal in mind of this is what I'm going to do to be able to quit my full-time job. So the sacrifice of working nights and weekends was no big deal to me at all. But by the time spring of 2021 rolled around, I was feeling really kind of burnt out and discouraged a little bit. Just this longing of, I know this is what I'm meant to do. And I am so tired of working a full-time job, doing something I don't want to do. I know I'm meant to make jewelry and do this and be my own boss. And I remember sitting and having these conversations with Brad and just being so frustrated and just so ready to make a change. And I look back now and I just wish that I could give that girl a hug and tell her you're going to make it work. And I knew I would make it work. I just didn't know when. Kind of like, when something huge is about to happen or you're about to make a huge change, the moment right before that is the hardest moment. That's the moment where most people quit and most people give up because that's where it gets the hardest, is when you're right there on that precipice of something major happening. And looking back now, I can see that's exactly where I was, because less than a couple of months after me really having those conversations with Brad and feeling those feelings, I was able to grow my business to a point where I made enough money to pay off all of my private student loans. And for me, that was the telltale sign that I was ready to leave my full-time job. There was a few other things that went into that decision, but that was a major financial burden lifted from my shoulders. So on July 2nd of 2021, it was my last day working for the University of Alabama and my first day being a full-time business owner. That day is a day I'll never forget. And that feeling is something that I hope I never forget either. And since that day, gratefully so, my business has continued to grow even more. And I love my job making jewelry. I absolutely love it. I truly feel it's a gift and a talent I've been given to share with the world. And I plan to continue to do that. But I feel like there's just something more for me. And that is exactly where I got the idea to start this podcast. And that's why I'm so excited for this platform and to continue to share more and share deeper things here and connect with you on a deeper level. I know that these first 2 episodes have been all about me, and I don't want that to be the theme of this podcast, but I do feel that it's important that I kind of lay a groundwork for you and let you get to know me and my story before we can move forward and start to get to know each other better. I think it's important that you kind of know where I'm coming from so you can go along this journey with me to where we are going together. So yeah, that is kind of my story in a nutshell. I hope that you were able to learn something new about me. If you have any questions about my story, about me, how I started my business, or if there's anything you want to chat further about, send me a DM on Instagram at Beautifully Consumed. I would love to chat with you there. And that is all for this episode today. I will see you next time.